All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA DFS video. Sorry for the slightly later start time, but we're going to be breaking down this NBA slate. Got Chuck back here. It seems like a lot of people did pretty well yesterday. I think Chuck included, or over the weekend as well. A lot of good sweats, especially in the Discord chat. I just want to kind of recap yesterday's slate and maybe the weekend as well.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, no, I want you to take that right there.
All right. Yeah, I mean, we had a pretty good slate yesterday. Some of the model stuff was really good. One of the things I pointed out was Giannis being very high in the OF index and in the DK value, and somehow they got blown out by the Hawks. I think some people in the chat were, asked about, are we worried about blowout? But the other way, Bucks blowing them out. And Dame had a terrible game. Giannis did fine in his minutes. He probably lost about 6 minutes to blow out, so it could have been a much better day. And then Embiid with that, questionable for rest, and then it turns out he played and he just, had a monster nuke of a game, the best fantasy game of any player this season. Really changed the slate a lot. One other thing I want to point out, I mentioned Taurean Prince at 2% and 1% owned was the best value according to the model yesterday, and he did very well. He ended up being one of the best value plays of the day at low ownership. I had a pretty good lineup with him in it, but unfortunately it also had Scoot Henderson. So shout out to Scoot. Didn't work out. That guy is he's having an adjustment period to the NBA. He's still cheap. He was chalk yesterday. I don't think he's chalk today. He's probably unowned today. 0%. Is that right? 1% owned. I mean, if you want to take shots there, it's a large slate, but that's probably not a spot I'm getting to today.
Yeah, he's someone that's eventually going to figure it out, but right now it kind of just almost seems like we need to take a wait-and-see approach with it.
Yeah, I mean, and then one of the other guys that I was pretty interested at very low ownership, DeAndre Ayton. So Robert Williams, Joel Embiid smashed. It was mostly against Ayton. He crushed Ayton, but Ayton put up like 29 and a half DK points in his 20 minutes. Then he basically got benched for Robert Williams. So yeah. It's not that we were wrong about Ayton. He just didn't play. But the thing is, Embiid kind of crushed Robert Williams too. And so I feel like Ayton's a better offensive player, so just play Ayton. And Robert Williams is already out for rest today, so Ayton is a spot I'm going to go back to. His price is the same. It's not a bad matchup for him. 1% ownership on both sites. His price came up a little bit, and so we don't have to play that much to be over the field on him. And one other thing I want to say, I point out a lot of low-owned players. I'm not saying that to play all the low-owned players in the same lineup. Like, it depends on the contest. If it's smaller contest, play mostly chalk and just mix it up with one, maybe two of these low-owned guys that we recommend. And then in a larger contest, maybe play two of the low-owned guys with the chalk and, lineup construction. We had a pretty good discussion in the Discord this morning about that. So, just some things to keep in mind.
Yeah. You mentioned that with the Ayton stuff. Yeah, that's one of the big kind of, I don't want to say big injury news stuff, but Robert Williams being out is kind of big. And we did mention the Discord. I just want to show you guys a fancy new slide here that I just created. So I'm kind of excited to show it off. So here we go. I think I got all the information right. I was working. Like the graphic, but looking at the injury news, I'll get into today's injury reports. We'll pull that up. You already mentioned Robert Williams. We think that's going to benefit DeAndre Ayton. Anthony Simons has been ruled out again. Is that something you want to just touch on first, or should we kind of just go position by position since it's a bigger slate and just kind of mention stuff in passing?
Well, with Anthony Simons being out, so Malcolm Brogdon's price was too cheap yesterday. He came up a little bit, and I kind of insinuated on the YouTube stream that I wasn't super interested in him, but luckily you had a little bit of a save in the Discord chat saying you really liked him, and so that was a good one. I think we can still go back to him today. He's projected for similar minutes. He's been a pretty great fantasy producer. It's very clear that Scoot isn't it right now, and so.
The thing that worries me with Portland just in general is like it clearly seemed like they weren't trying to even compete in that game once it was out of hand. They're like, all right, let's get the youth some minutes. And so someone like Brogdon is always going to be the kind of guy that gets benched. Now, I guess with his rotation coming in off the second unit, he's going to play into the fourth quarter, but they're never going to give him that end of game fourth quarter minutes. I don't know. It is the back end of back-to-back. Part of the reason why the NBA world isn't hyped up on him is because of his injury history. I guess that's like Boston reports were saying that he was kind of he was a player teams didn't really want because of that as well. So if he gets his minutes reduced here, I guess that wouldn't be too shocking as well. But like you said, it kind of could depend. If Scoot Henderson has a good game, I guess it wouldn't be shocking to see Brogdon struggle. first day, but he's a safe play, it seems like.
Yeah, and Shaden Sharp is still there. His price came up a little bit, so he doesn't quite like hit the absolute fantasy point ceiling is pretty similar still, but it's just the points per dollar is slowly coming down slate by slate. He's projected for decent ownership tonight, 10% on DraftKings. It's a spot that we can still get to. It's not going to be part of my core or anything, though.
Yeah. And then what other news? Nick Claxton is still out. I do feel like that is somewhat of a benefit to Ben Simmons, actually. I know Darren Sharp was pretty chalky in the last matchup. Let's see here. We got news that Chris Middleton is going to be active after it seemed like he was going to be out, and now Marjon Beauchamp is out for the Bucks as well. That doesn't really move the needle too much. And I can't just say we go position by position unless there's significant injury news you want to touch on first.
I just mentioned the Lakers. So I think the assumption was that LeBron was going to sit, but a report came out that he was probable. And so that's going to affect things. I love it because it means we don't have to make, weird decisions on the Lakers role players, which I am not happy about them right now. But yeah, let's get into the positions.
All right, so here we go, guys. We're going to get into position by position. We're going to start out with the guards here on DraftKings. So I'll sort it by point guard and shooting guard there. It's just the easiest way to do it.
I think we may have lost Eric for a second. All right, well, let's see if I can get into this. I'm sure I'll be back in just a moment.
You can't. Is it happening again where you can't hear me?
Okay, well, I can't pull up the model from my side. Eric will be back in a minute. So just start talking about some of the spots that I want to get to. The Daniel Gafford being out and the Wizards being the first game, I think is pretty significant because if we're getting to chalk from the first game, it reduces our ability to late swap later. And there's a couple spots from the Wizards that I actually really like today. I think Mike Muscala is probably expected to start for Daniel Gafford.
Can you hear me now, Chuck, or no?
I'm not quite sure if I'm live.
You still can't hear me, Chuck? I think you can hear me on this side. I don't know what's going on that other slide as to why.
Okay, yeah, you just completely blacked out there. Sorry about that. I wasn't sure if it was me or you.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just strange. But yeah, I heard what you mentioned about Gafford. So, but kind of that's an interesting spot. We can talk about that real quick. Washington. Gafford was someone I was kind of looking at point per minute wise as like a decent play just at his price tag at the start of the day. Now Mike Muscala, yeah, he probably does feel like someone would need to be on a little bit center wise. But that game, I know we don't like to script it, but that game kind of feels like it has some blowout risk.
Yeah, it definitely has some blowout risk. I mean, it's about an 11-point game right now, and Boston's pretty good. I think Boston's the best team in the NBA this year so far. They're just very strong, at every single position. And so Mike Muscala, we're still showing 0% ownership in the model. I think that's going to come up once his minutes projection corrects. But the spot, so when starters are out, a lot of people are going to want to flock to the backup. And it's not incorrect because Mike Muscala is min priced. If we knew Gafford was out a few days ago or something, Mike Muscala would probably be maybe only $1,000 more on DraftKings. And so at the min price, he does allow us to fit studs like Luka, Giannis, Jokic tonight. But it is a little bit of a boost to a couple of the other starters. I think Kyle Kuzma gets a slight boost, but the guy that I'm really interested on the Wizards is Denny Avdia at 5,500 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. Right now projected for 4% ownership on both sites. We saw Denny display a very safe, very good rebounding floor and ceiling towards the end of last season. And so that's the spot that I kind of want to target from the Wizards. But again, kind of be careful because it does reduce our ability to late swap. But Denny's the guy from the early game that I think I'm going to target the most.
Got it. And so no Kyle Kuzma, no Jordan Poole, just because they're a little bit priced up. Even on FanDuel where they're a little bit cheaper at all.
I'd still like to get to Kuzma a little bit over the field, even with Daniel Gafford in. That 7,400, 7,500 price tag's a little too cheap. And then Jordan Poole, the 8,100 on DraftKings. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get there. It's a large slate. There's a lot of guards I want to play. But 7,300 on FanDuel, it seems like a little too much of an overcorrection, and that's reflected in the ownership. He's 7% over there. So that's a spot that I'm still going to get to a little bit.
All right, so I'm going to attempt to transition to another slide. We'll see if it's working. If it's not, we'll just stick with this one. Is this one working for you, Chuck?
Yeah, I can see you. Great.
Yeah, I don't know. It just might be that slide that's messing up. So little editing on the fly there. But looking at right now, the best guards that we have, it's looking like Luka again. He finally got priced up, and to me, that was kind of the slate for us. Is that it's correctly priced this time? Finally, like all the other slates, there's some glaring value. It seemed like. And now today, everyone seems to be properly priced. SGA's priced up, Halliburton's priced up. I'm struggling to see value. Maybe Desmond Bain. I like CJ McCollum. Damian Lillard is priced up again. It's just like maybe Ben Simmons. Where are we looking at for kind of value here? Or are we just going back to those same players, like the cheat codes, where we're getting guys that aren't traditional point guards at the start of last year and whatnot? Players like Scotty Barnes, maybe Marcus Smart. What are we looking at there? Because it is a weird slate today, I would say.
So, like on a macro point of view, point guards and centers, I think, are the most valuable positions here. And so, like you just mentioned, anytime we have the ability to play a point guard at a position on our DraftKings lineups or FanDuel lineups that's not at the point guard position, we have to take advantage of it and just play, 3 point guards or maybe even 4 point guards. And there was a question in the Discord right before the show started about, is Luka our favorite pay up? And I do like Luka. I think his price is good. It's appropriate. And at the sub 5% ownership that we haven't projected for, it's a pretty good spot. My concern is that this is a large slate and there's going to be a lot of high scores tonight. So just kind of consider, what kind of score does Luka have to put up to be in the winning lineup tonight? And it's probably 65 plus, if not a little bit more. I think there's going to be a lot of cheaper guys that put up 50. Now, hitting that combination is a lot more difficult than just playing Luka and probably locking in his 60 plus fantasy points. We don't have great value yet. Maybe it'll come out later. But so Luka's a spot I like getting to. He's very low owned, and I think we could take advantage of that a bit.
Okay, yeah, and yeah, I would agree with that. And we do have some value like Mike Muscala that we can fit in there with him. I'd be fine with that. And even with the pricing, it is kind of tough to do a kind of fair and balanced build as well. Like there is just a lot of risk, it seems like, on the slate. Like I'm fine getting a Scotty Barnes. But really, I don't know. I'm kind of struggling. I'll show you guys the DK value here and FanDuel value that we have. We're seeing Derek White popping up in there, which, sure, against Washington, blowout potential. He probably should be locked into getting those minutes. A lot of people might be playing Cam Thomas. For me, it kind of feels like we're either playing Cam Thomas or Spencer Dinwiddie because those two are both pretty cheap, and we can see Cam Thomas, third best value on DraftKings at the guard position. Dinwiddie, the fifth best. And then you also have Ben Simmons right there, who I like having a bigger role just with Claxton out. I feel like they just shift to him playing a little bit more of a big, but it's a little bit weird with him. But yeah, it's just a weird slate. Which one for the Nets are you looking at? Are you looking at Dinwiddie or Thomas, or just it doesn't matter, getting exposure to both?
So it's so crazy to see Cam Thomas's ownership. I know we only have him for 19%, but I'd actually be kind of surprised if he came in that low. I'm pretty sure he's the top play on some of the other sites, and so it's going to come in more than 19%. Spencer Dinwiddie, 31 and 41% is. It's kind of insane. And again, they're in the early game. And so I think it's definitely fine to get there. And I'll probably be close to the field on that 31 and 41% number. But I don't know. I don't love it. I feel like I'd rather play Ben Simmons at the low ownership, just pay a little bit more, especially we get to play him in the small forward and power forward positions. Cam Thomas, though, he's probably fine chalk. I mean, he's been doing great. His over under for points today, I think, was 23.5 points.
That's high.
And so, I mean, he's a very good basketball player. I'm not quite sure why he wasn't really in the rotation last year. He had like 3 50-point games in a row, and he's had 2 good games in a row. So it's not like he's not capable of doing that again. But I mentioned on the show yesterday, I do tend to try to get away from like massive chalk like this when it's not necessarily chasing points, but the guy's on a heater right now, right? And this is not what we're expecting from Cam Thomas. He might be overperforming, or maybe this is just what he is. Maybe he's a 25 point per game guy for the rest of the season. But we'll see.
I mean, he has gotten 19 and 21 shot attempts, but to your point, he's been good shooting the basketball through those first 2 games, and it's just probably a small sample size where he's just been shooting the basketball well, where like Spencer Dinwiddie didn't really play all too well in the first game, played a little bit better in the second game. Mikal Bridges he's kind of struggled. So yeah, you've had other players like Cam Thomas step up in his absence.
Yeah, and I'm just now running my DraftKings set, and I'm getting all the Cam Thomas. So
okay. And what he means by that is from the OF lineup builder, guys. So like it's right there, lineup builder, and you just select NBA. I don't like to pop that up on the screen just as an FY because it's a little bit bigger on the screen, so I'd have to adjust the screen. That's an FY. That's why we don't show it too much. But looking at other plays here, Shaden Sharp, we already mentioned, he's fine guard-wise. Malik Beasley maybe gets a little bit more run on FanDuel, like at 4.5. He's okay. And we'll just sort by FanDuel value because I would say it's a little bit better there. We got Derek White, same price as he is on DraftKings. Malik Beasley, I already mentioned, popping up as one of the better values. Spencer Dinwiddie still there. Killian Hayes, he's coming in at low ownership. So is Horton Tucker, and those are two of the better values. Any love for those two?
Okay, so this is kind of similar to, I guess, the Torian Prince super value yesterday at no ownership, but it's a little bit different. Like Torian Prince, so I mentioned that he's historically one of the worst fantasy point producers in the entire league, right? But like his job is to hit open threes and get a couple steals and blocks, get a few rebounds, and he can get there. But with the Pistons, I think they have too many high usage guys to really want to target Killian Hayes today. Cade Cunningham, I think people forget that he was a first overall pick. It's a guy I don't mind getting to today as well at like basically no ownership. They have Jaden Ivey, who's playing 20 minutes a game. He looked like a stud last season, but maybe he's regressed, or maybe it's just the offense isn't working for him. And Asar Thompson doesn't take up too much usage, but he is there. And then Jalen Duren has been like the big breakout of the season so far. So
we'll touch on Duren, guys. Don't worry about that. I am looking at the ownership right now. It does seem to be that we have a decent amount of leverage spots just in general. Like scrolling down, Luka's low on, like you said. Jordan Clarkson, I don't love, but you could play him. Marcus Smart, who, I don't love either, but, coming in at low ownership. SGA in an awesome matchup against Detroit, who we kind of just mentioned them. I like CJ McCollum. I feel like he's too cheap on DraftKings. I mean, there's a lot of great leverage spots here. Halliburton, who probably a little bit priced up. I like that matchup against Chicago. How do you feel about being a little bit more overweight and a little bit more underweight on some of the chalk, at least at the guard position?
Let me just sort this by ownership. So we got Dinwiddie, Holiday, Brandon Ingram being this high in ownership is extremely surprising to me because I actually haven't really even thought about him today. I think I actually took his under points, rebounds, assists earlier on a bunch of my my slips. So that's not a spot I'm going to be targeting at all. It's not to say he can't get there, but it's just if 25% of the field is playing him, I'd rather take the leverage and think that, if he has a down game, anyone else I play but him is going to contribute more to possibly winning a GPP.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I have it pulled up right now. Zion, he's obviously a little bit higher price, but like, how is Ingram and CJ McCollum's like ownership that spread out, especially considering their pricing and production lately? I don't know. That seems kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and that's an easy leverage if you're fading Brandon Ingram. Just play a little bit more CJ McCollum, and it's so easy. Like CJ McCollum doing well doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a negative to Brandon Ingram, but anything CJ McCollum does probably takes away from Brandon Ingram's opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And then just hitting on a couple of questions before we go ahead and get into the next position, which will be the forwards. Let's see here. Is 3K person a large field? I think that depends on the sport or the slip. Like single entry, sure, that's big enough. I guess, what are your takes on that?
A 3K person field, I wouldn't exactly call it large field, but we want to apply more large field principles than we would versus small field principles. And back to that thing I was talking about with overall lineup construction. In a 3K person field, I mean, if it's a single entry, and maybe this sounds bad, but just play the best plays. Just follow the model. Watch that you're not playing too many contrarian plays, and you really only need one contrarian guy with the rest of the chalk. The chalk is the chalk for a reason, and NBA, the fantasy points is tied so it's just minutes. Who plays minutes? You have to be on the court. It's not like football where you can play one snap and score a touchdown and be optimal. You have to be on the court because the scoring here is steady scoring. And so if it's 3K field multi-entry, like if it's a 20 max, for example, some of the night slates and turbo slates I know on DraftKings are like that, then you can still just go heavy on the chalk and just mix in a few contrarian plays within the lineups, not necessarily together.
He nailed it well. Let's see here. My contacts are blurry right now. I don't know why. Barnes is pretty low owned again. Yeah, he's a decent GPP play, I would say, in general there. Steph 10K. If Clay sits, yeah, we're waiting on the news for Clay Thompson there. Best value, we'll touch on that. We kind of mentioned on some of the good guard values, but we'll go ahead and get into small forward, power forward spot here. We already mentioned a little bit with Daniel Gafford news, where some of the Washington players might get a little bit of a bump there, but just sorting it by the best DK value currently, we got Zaire Williams popping up again. He has not been price corrected, even though he's been pretty good. Jalen Johnson, who was someone that we were looking at yesterday, we could go back to him. Isaiah Stewart, who's someone that we've been on, he's still too cheap. Ben Simmons is still cheap. It's, to me, this is a spot where it's weird. I almost like loading up on the forwards again, and that's kind of something I kind of recommended yesterday in the Discord, and it felt ugly saying it. What are your kind of thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, so forward today is very strong. We have Giannis, Tatum, LeBron at the top, and I mean, they're expensive. And then we have some value plays in the mid range that I really liked. I mentioned Denny Avdia. You just mentioned Jalen Johnson, who is he pulling that ownership? So he's the highest projected ownership for a forward today. Royce O'Neal second. It's kind of odd, but the other guy I'm actually more interested in than Jalen Johnson is DeAndre Hunter at 2% ownership versus 37% ownership. Yeah, Jalen Johnson's been a fantastic fantasy points per minute guy, and it's a lot better for him that he's in the starting lineup. But that leaves DeAndre Hunter to kind of be forgotten. And like in terms of like absolute basketball skill, DeAndre Hunter is a better basketball player than Jalen Johnson. And I've mentioned that with the departure of John Collins on the Hawks, I think DeAndre Hunter is the guy who stepped up, and he has a bit. He lost some minutes yesterday due to the blowout, but in the minutes that he played, he was fantastic. And then the game before, I think he put up like an 8x at this price. And now it's not for sure that he's going to put up an 8x, but if DeAndre Hunter is playing those 32 minutes that we haven't projected for, I think it's just at 2% versus 37%. That's way too much. Go ahead.
I like that call. Just, I mean, I'm looking at like the shot attempts for Jalen Johnson. He's been pretty efficient, and I know he's around the rim a little bit more. Like both games, it was a blowout, like you said, and they're both probably going to get around 30 minutes. They're both probably going to get similar production, and you're getting more than half of the ownership. Yeah, I like that call a decent amount right there.
Like, it's an imperfect analogy, but Jalen Johnson being projected for 18 times the ownership of DeAndre Hunter, is he going to outscore DeAndre Hunter 17 out of 18 times? No, he's not. And I mean, they're both shooting over 50% right now, which is probably unsustainable. But yeah. I don't know. This is a personal feeling. I think that DeAndre Hunter can sustain it more than Jalen Johnson, but Jalen Johnson does probably have a safer rebounding floor, which helps with his fantasy score.
Yeah, I agree there. And just looking at FanDuel as well, like Hunter's a better play on FanDuel, even where he's like $600 cheaper.
Yeah, and at 1% ownership. So again, this is a contrarian play. Don't go crazy on DeAndre Hunter. I mean, I'm going crazy on DeAndre Hunter, but I'm kind of a very contrarian player. But mix him into your lineups more than 2%, and I think you're good.
Mm-hmm. And now we're just looking at some plays I kind of want to call. I thought DeMar DeRozan, I was hoping he'd be a little bit sneaky. No, a lot of people are getting to him at 16% projected ownership, but I think he's a good play at a good spot going against Indy. I feel like that's going to be a game that we kind of want to be targeting. I don't hate Jeremy Grant, but also not someone I'm going on my way to play. I still like Isaiah Stewart, but he's pulling in ownership again, so probably someone that we don't need to be going out of our way to play. John Collins, I want to call out as well, because John Collins just feels too cheap on both slates. I want to see his ownership. There's no way, right? 1%.
Yeah.
That's no.
Yeah, when I was going through the slate last night and building my dummy lineups for DraftKings and FanDuel, John Collins was probably the first person I put in my lineups, especially on DraftKings. And to see him at 1%, like, I'm so excited to be way over the field on John Collins. It's a new situation. I think that a lot of the projection sites, and even our own, it's a small sample with Utah. And so it's going to take some time to correct to what it is now. But he's been fantastic. He's playing some center minutes. Walker Kessler's kind of, I don't know what's going on with the rotation at guard or big man in Utah, but John Collins playing some center minutes and just having more opportunity than he did in Atlanta. Like, this is the spot today, I think, if you want to get contrarian. Play John Collins and play chalk, and you're probably good.
Yeah, honestly, like, I'm just going to put him in the dummy build for now. I'm like really shocked here, because like I literally had the same process as you. Like, he was in all my dummy builds, and I thought he would be chalk. And like, you look at his game log here, 2 of the games have been blowouts, and sure, he hasn't really gotten too much minutes in those, but the one game that was close against the Clippers, 34 minutes, he had 32 DraftKings points in that. So for FanDuel, about the same. And that's, I mean, at 35 against the Kings, this is maybe a better match, maybe not, maybe a little bit of a blowout foul trouble. But man, I like, let's just look at the other forwards around this price point, because it's just, I feel like it warrants some time. I know you nailed it, but like Jalen Williams right there, Bobby Portis, Thompson, we got Denny, who's fine, Kuminga. Like I'm gonna go a little bit higher. At what point would you want to play this player? Okay, and I'm just gonna name up from John Collins, and we can consider ownership a little bit. But there's Betty. Just stop me when you would say you want that player. Heald, Portis, Jalen Williams, PJ Washington, Austin Reeves, Draymond Green, Gordon Hayward, MPJ,
maybe
Shaedon
MPJ.
Sharp.
Maybe MPJ is a guy that I'd be interested in. His rebounding floor has been insane this year, and so I'm not sure that's going to keep up. But that's probably the first name that I not necessarily would rather play, but that I would also play.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe Gordon Hayward for me as well, but that's also considering ownership, because he's been a little bit too hot though recently. Like that's going to come back down. But yeah, that's crazy, and that's $600 difference, which mind blowing.
Yeah, and $600 on a large slate like this is actually it's a lot. You get to upgrade another position, so it's kind of a big deal.
Yes. So let's see here. Late to the show, who are the chalk plays today? We'll begin into that a little bit more as it goes. I'll show you guys the chalk for forward. We got Jalen Johnson, Royce O'Neal, Brandon Ingram, DFS, DeMar, and Levine. So a little bit of the Bulls ownership there. Do you feel Muscala is a core play if he starts?
No. Muscala is still going to be contrarian regardless. So the thing with Muscala is I think his floor is pretty low, but his ceiling is decent. His ceiling is fine. And the point of playing Mike Muscala at 3K, we're not expecting him to ever put up 40 fantasy points, but if he gives us, I don't know, if he just plays 25 minutes and can be 1 fantasy point per minute guy, and he allows us to fit in players like Luka or Jokic, that's the point of playing Mike Muscala, is what he does for the rest of your lineup. Not because even a 7X from Mike Muscala, it's not necessarily enough to be in a winning lineup tonight. There's so many, like I said, there's so many guys who are just going to put up monster scores tonight that you really got to nail the top end guys if you're playing Mike Muscala. And I am playing a bunch of Mike Muscala today, but I'm not going crazy on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good play, but we only have him projected to get 20 minutes. So if that happens, then yeah, his ceiling's a little bit limited there in terms of GPP winning upside.
But just considering, especially the type of player he is, we saw this happen in preseason. This guy shot 5 for 5 from 3 to start the game. Like, now that's probably a once or twice a season thing, but just that he's capable of getting hot and the rebounding and maybe a couple stocks. So we're interested in Mike Muscala. His ownership's going to come in above whatever we're projecting him for. I think it was at 0% on my last refresh, but
it's at 13 now in DraftKings, only 3 on FanDuel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that seems actually kind of appropriate for him. So. But the other thing I mentioned too, the center spot is so valuable. So on DraftKings we can play 2, but we still just want to be a little bit careful with that. And I saw a question in the chat: would we play Stewart at the center spot? And I think he has power forward eligibility. And so assuming he has power forward eligibility, I'm always going to say play these guys in the power forward spot so we can fit in another guy that only has center eligibility.
Yeah, and yes, just do that, because you also have the forward spot as well for, it just opens up a lot more. You can play 3 centers then as opposed to 2. And looking at, like, Stewart is pulling in some ownership, but it's only 13%. So maybe someone we can look at, and Anika pulling in a lot of ownership again. I was mad about this. I told people, I'm like, he's not, like, he's kind of a trap play, it felt like, and then the game blew out in the wrong way. And I'm like, okay, great. Anika's getting there. What are your thoughts on him tonight? I know I don't know if I want to use him in the center spot as well. It's weird.
I said the exact same thing on the stream yesterday, that I don't understand why he's pulling the ownership. Like, we were star for value yesterday, and then of course he gets that blowout run, and he had a great fantasy point per minute production yesterday. I told people I'd rather play Clint Capella. That ended up not working out, but I don't know, 25% of the field playing a 3,800 center who we can't project for more than 25 minutes, even in the best case scenario. It's just, I would rather avoid him again.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'd rather go with Muscala here for sure at $800 cheaper.
And especially on FanDuel, I really dislike playing the cheap centers on FanDuel unless it's like a super obvious spot, but this is not a super obvious spot. He comes off the bench, and if it's like someone filling in for an injured starter, at a cheap price on FanDuel capable of putting up or playing 30 plus minutes, and it's different. But
Yeah.
on FanDuel, I think we really want to play at least a mid-price center, if not one of the pay-ups.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so speaking of a pay up center, we got Jokic as looking like the best center play on both sites. Let me just sort it by OF index. And then you got Giannis and AD and Porzingis. And I would say Porzingis is kind of the lowest kind of safe price play that we have. And then we have Jalen Duren, obviously. Let's just talk about some of those players. So Jokic, Giannis, which one would you rather pay up for? They're both coming in pretty low owned.
So I mentioned this a little bit yesterday too, where just consider who we're playing in the other positions. If we're deciding between, for example, like yesterday was Giannis and Embiid. Today we're deciding between Jokic and Giannis. We just talked about how many great forward plays in that 5K range that helps us get to a pay up. And so I have a feeling my builds are going to lean towards Jokic. It's not necessarily that I like Jokic that much more, but I just think it makes more sense on an overall lineup construction point of view.
Yeah. And then is AD starting to get priced up correctly, or is he still a little bit too cheap?
I think he's too cheap, man. It's like, so if LeBron was out, it helps AD, but at 9,600 on DraftKings, center only, 11%, it's a spot I'm still, let me see if I got him in my run. I still have to make adjustments, but okay, so my initial run, I'm at the field on Anthony Davis. I'm at 10%. So, but it's a spot that I'm probably going to have to just boost him a little bit or put in a min exposure if you're using the lineup builder. And I want to get him a little bit more in my lineups.
Yeah, I agree. I still feel like he's too cheap. But I'm just going to sort it, the OF model by DraftKings salary real quick because I want to call out kind of a bunch of kind of interesting center plays at interesting price tags. Let's just put it that way. So like Clint Capella, I think is still kind of interesting at his price tag. DeAndre Ayton still interesting at his price tag. Xavier Tillman, Miles Turner. Those are all guys that are pretty low owned that are a little bit too cheap in my eyes. And somewhat the OF index's eyes as well, especially value wise. Which one of those are there any of those that kind of stand out to you as well?
I like the Clint Capella call. I'm always going to be on Clint Capella, but it's kind of similar to, not quite the same as a Kongwu, but he's never really going to play over 30 minutes. And so it's a guy that we're hoping for a 6X, but probably not much more. Yeah, I don't know. I like Jalen Duren still at a little bit higher of a price tag.
Let's talk about him. So Jalen Duren has been someone, I believe we both were hyping him up, right? Like at the beginning of the season, the first slate that he was on, we both talked him up. And I don't think his price is high enough. Now, sure, he's going to come back down. He's not going to be as efficient shooting the basketball, but I just don't see that happening tonight against OKC, where I think that's going to be a team that we're targeting a bunch. And yeah, the rebounds will eventually come down as well, for sure. But I kind of feel like he's going to be someone that averages around 35 fantasy points, maybe even 40 this season. What are your kind of thoughts there? Like, where is he going to regress to? And then just give me your thoughts on him for tonight.
So the 8K on FanDuel, he's been smashing that price tag too. It's a little expensive, so I'll probably still only get there a little bit on FanDuel. He's projected for 2%, but the 7,100 on DraftKings, I'm still happy to pay. I've seen some NBA DFS guys on Twitter talking about like, how is he still pulling this much ownership? His projection is this, but it's a different situation. And these projection systems, even ours, haven't quite caught up to what he is this season and just what it's doing. And so projected for 33 minutes, even at 7,100, he's clearly going to be better than a fantasy point a minute guy. And so I think it's pretty safe to assume his floor tonight at this DraftKings salary is a 5X. It's just double potential every single night. He's getting a couple assists. He, blocks and steals. He's got to be my favorite center play tonight.
And guys, I feel like Chuck brought up a good point. Like, this is why, like, we've been crushing it so far this start of the season. Like, I feel like everyone that's involved with Occupy has been having a good start to the season thus far. And it's literally because of small things like this. You trust the data in the majority for sure. But early season NBA DFS especially, you can gain small edges like you can for Jalen Duren. So while some people are saying maybe 8% is a lot of ownership, it's not. That is just shockingly low again. Same thing with John Collins. Like, be an early adapter to this stuff, because we saw this last year with Lauri Markkanen. I remember we were talking of Lauri Markkanen a ton, and it just took the industry a little bit longer to get there because, well, it makes sense. Data's not getting there, so it makes sense. Like, that's kind of just how NBA works. But that's one of those situations where you make one or two low ownership pivots. It's not even pivot, just plug and plays. Maybe Duren, maybe John Collins. That's where you can gain a big edge on the field. But majority of the time trust the data, and then you can make small little differences like Duran, like John Collins.
So there's finding a balance between chasing points or chasing fantasy scores and playing good plays, but I don't think we're chasing with Jalen Duren. It's very clear that he's a dominant center, and Chet Holmgren is a good defensive player, but I mean Jokic is Jokic, but he kind of bullied the shit out of Chet Holmgren yesterday. I don't think Duren's going to have a problem taking advantage of that around the hoop. Like Chet's probably going to get a couple blocks on him, but Jalen Duren, I mean, it's just we saw the books adjust very quickly too. I think it was his double line that I saw where the first couple games it was pretty good price, and now it's just it's pretty favored for the over.
And it's funny, I put out a tweet about his like most improved odds. I forget what they were, but they came down like 20, I think. It was like 55 to 1 or something like that. I think it came down like 35 to 1. So they did adjust. For what it's worth, guys, James Wiseman is apparently available tonight. I don't know. Have you seen any news on this, chat? Have you guys seen any news on this? I don't think I've seen reasons as to why he's been out. It's just saying that he's been available. He had a finger issue. It didn't seem like that was the reason as to why he was sent out, but we never got a clear, or I didn't see a clear indication. Did you see anything, chat? Did you see anything?
So on that first Detroit game, I'm pretty sure that he was not injured. I'm pretty sure he was expected to play. It's just the sites had top lines up on him, and I know that one of my buddies was talking about please play 1 minute so that my unders on him, hit, because if he doesn't play, then they're just voided. But I just think I see like James Wiseman's a good fantasy producer. He was a top pick, but it's like Jalen Duren is Jalen Duren. We already know he's pretty good at basketball. Now, he's probably going to regress a little bit from what he's been doing, but I see no reason to take away minutes from Jalen Duren to play Wiseman. So Wiseman could still play 12 to 15 minutes tonight, but I don't think that's going to, that's just a normal rotation. Jalen Duren's not going to lose minutes to James Wiseman unless he's in foul trouble, or maybe he has a bad game and they think James Wiseman's a better matchup on Chet, but...
So my thing there that I was trying to get to, it's like, let's say Jalen Duren does struggle. I think it's just going to be Isaiah Stewart beating up on Chet Holmgren then, because Stewart's going to get the minutes. We know that. And he was very close to getting a double-double, which you give him that bonus and, a little bit better of a game. And even like Bagley, like he is someone he plays well and he's not getting minutes, but let's say maybe Duren or Stewart gets into foul trouble. I think he'd be the next man up, and he's a stud when he gets minutes. He's a strong point per minute player. I mean, look at this, 15 minutes, 19, 13 minutes, 20, 16 minutes, 24. So like that to me would be the pivot, but I want to just talk about that because the ownership's just weird. But
well, I'm happy you mentioned Isaiah Stewart as a pivot. Like we touched on him a little bit already, but we know that he's in the starting lineup and he's going to play minutes alongside Duren, so that he already has. Like, we don't need something weird to happen for him to reach his potential. Like, he could get there just playing alongside Duren, and then maybe something happens and Isaiah Stewart just slides down to center and they just go a little bit smaller than usual. And I love Isaiah Stewart. He was already trying to fight someone in, like, the first game they played. So he's just, he's a fun player, and as long as he's in this mid 5K range, I think he's great.
Yep. So let's just touch on some other centers, and then, we probably got to be getting out of here shortly. So we'll give you guys kind of the closing thoughts for this and giving you guys kind of a little bit of a first look build. Obviously, we got a lot of time. Before we get into the closing thoughts, let me just remind everyone of the sexy new slide that I made of the Discord chat. Let's just start with kind of the stud plays, or just the plays that we want to be starting out with.
Just pull up my build here. So I'm actually not getting to too much of the super pay ups. Maybe I need to make some adjustments still, but some contrarian guys like Anthony Davis is fairly contrarian tonight. I mean, for what it's worth, like Luka and Jokic are also going to, and Giannis, like they're all coming in for 10% or lower ownership. So I think they're all fine to get to, but just, I really don't want to have to force in value to get there, especially it looks like Mike Muscala's ownership is above 30% now. And so just consider that a lot of these lineups are going to have Mike Muscala, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a little bit of a weird situation where it reduces your, you're just not that different. Like everyone's going to have the same combos of guys, but definitely still play these guys, but just don't like force in this super cheap value to get there.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we should start with Muscala and then upgrade if possible.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, he's chalk now, so it's fine to get there a bunch.
Yeah, but like I said, like if we can upgrade, I think we should do that. We already decided John Collins. Did you want to go AD as a forward? I kind of agree with that.
I don't hate it. I think he only has center eligibility though,
Oh,
and
does he?
so we have to make a decision between him and Duran, our two
I'd rather go
favorite center
Dern.
plays. I think I
I'd
would
rather
too.
go Dern.
Save that 2K and pay up somewhere else.
A little bit later per game too, so we got that. Guard wise, we mentioned a bunch. So like we got Cunningham there that I think we both think he could be a good kind of low ownership play. I like CJ McCollum. We got Ben Simmons there, Spencer Dinwiddie. We still have Scotty Barnes there, Cam Thomas. Maybe we pay up for Luka. Where do you think we should go guard wise?
I think the safe play is Cam Thomas, and I say safe. It's not necessarily bad. Like as of now in my DK run, I just ran it again after making a couple adjustments. He's still by far my highest exposed player. So
okay, we'll do that then. And I want to mention, I do think like Mikal Bridges or Spencer Dinwiddie are great pivots off of him. And I know Dinwiddie was pulling in a little bit of ownership too, so maybe just Mikal Bridges.
I like that.
Let's see here. I do think. Let me go back to the model. Jalen Johnson's pulling in a bunch of ownership. He was one of the better values. Zaire Williams, we didn't really touch on. I guess Zaire Williams at 4% or Jalen Johnson at 34%?
I think we're just going with Jalen Johnson. I mean, Zaire Williams has similar. He's gotten reboundings. He's gotten some good rebounds, so it's a little bit of a safe-ish fantasy score. But I think that Jalen Johnson's displayed a better ceiling, even though he's the chalk value.
I'm fine with that. So he takes it the forward spot. We still could play Williams at the small forward spot. I don't know if we want to exactly go there because on average we have 7.7 left over, and that's kind of the thing tonight. That's why we might not have to pay down for Mike Muscala. Point guard wise is tough. I do think I want to go McCollum, Simmons, or Scotty Barnes, or maybe both of them. One in the small forward, one in the point guard spot. What are your kind of thoughts there?
So maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but my mind is still pretty high on Scotty Barnes. But I do like Scotty and Ben Simmons. You mentioned CJ McCollum. I wasn't really considering him that much, but I need to take another look after the show ends. And if he's not pulling ownership, then it's probably a pretty great GPP play.
Well, he put up 34, 35 DraftKings points in 30 minutes against New York, and that was a very low-scoring game. I'm not exactly sure. Let me just look at this game total here. 226 is not a game you would avoid. So, as long as it's a higher scoring game, I don't mind him. But yeah, we'll just go Scotty Barnes here and then Ben Simmons. I think I'm fine with that.
And we just got some news. So Kyrie Irving's officially ruled out today. And Bam Adebayo is officially ruled out today. Rui Hachimura is now doubtful. So we can assume he's out. Not that it affects much. But Kyrie. So I wonder if Luka's ownership comes up a little bit now.
Mm-hmm. And now he's not as much of a strong kind of pivot. So let's touch on it. Tim Hardaway Jr., is that someone that benefits or kind of where we're looking at? I guess we'll refresh the model here, see what that says.
He probably benefits, but for me, I think we have too many other good plays I'm more comfortable with. He does have a bit of a ceiling if he gets hot, but I'd rather go like my contrarian plays today. I've already mentioned are like DeAndre Hunter, Denny Avdia.
Yeah.
I'm still more comfortable going to those guys.
What about Josh Green by chance? Any love for him getting more minutes in this one? 28, maybe gets like 34 now.
Someone asked me that question in preseason. I'm pretty sure I said nope, and that was the game that he went off. So I don't know. The low ownership, he's pulling no ownership. So if you play him, again, it's kind of just what are we expecting from him to contribute to our lineups? And if he puts up 30 plus, he's probably going to be a pretty great play. I think it's asking a lot.
Okay. And then let's just touch on that Miami stuff, and then we'll begin out of here. Don't want to get into the Discord time too much. So Bam was ruled out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that Thomas Bryant we're looking at, or are we just looking at Jimmy Butler really just getting high usage, or is Miami and the Bucks kind of just stay aways now because this game could be more of a blowout?
So again, Thomas Bryant's going to be a cheap center. I kind of just hope he takes some ownership away from Mike Muscala. I'm not super interested in Thomas Bryant, but if his ownership stays low, then he's definitely a decent contrarian play because he's a decent fantasy producer, and if he gets the minutes, then he's going to be fine. I feel like this is more of the kind of the same concept I was talking about earlier. I feel like this is more of a boost to other guys like Jimmy Butler, Kevin Love, even Tyler Herro. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Like those are fine plays, but the minutes are probably going to get spread out. So real quickly, we got a question about is Miles Turner contrarian play? Yeah, I would say so. I think he's fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's so many good contrarian plays. We don't have to go crazy on them. Just mix them in and play the chalk. Like the chalk's chalk for a reason. And you'll probably do pretty well tonight. And then I did see a question, SGA or Doncic. So I think they're both great plays. I think SGA is still an awesome tournament play. He's going to come in with very little ownership. His price is, I think it's a little bit too cheap. I think he should be priced up a little bit. I think FanDuel priced him up a little bit more. But I do really like SGA. And if you can do something with that 1,400 you're saving off of Luka, then I think it's great.
I just touched on that game real quick, guys. Like I know Chuck says a lot of times we don't need a stack, and I agree with that. But if you're someone that does limited entries, Chuck does much more mass entry stuff. I think that would be a game you could stack. Like if you're someone that does 10, 20 lineups, maybe get some exposure to that game a little bit higher, just because I think everyone's a little bit too cheap, and it's kind of a easy to stack game.
Yeah, it made me think about that game last week when Cleveland played OKC and Donovan Mitchell was 30% owned and SGA was 2% owned. I had a bunch of lineups specifically with SGA and Donovan Mitchell in it. And so stacking isn't super important, like you mentioned, but it's something that, if you can get a 2% SGA going off for 60, then you're going to be feeling pretty great about it.
Yeah. All right, so guys, that is going to be it. Remember, we got the Discord chat pretty much going live right now. So if you guys are Occupy Fantasy members, be there. Link to that is in the description for anyone that isn't. Chuck, any last words?
No, just, play the best plays. Thank you to you for hosting. If you're interested in the model we're showing on the stream every day, you can sign up for the Occupy website. I think it's $7 a week to try it out. It's $1 a day. I mean, even if you're only playing a few dollars a day, and I mean, if it helps you win slightly more, then it's probably worth it. And if you like it enough, sign up for a month, a year, whatever, and then join the Discord. Instructions in the description below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff.
Bang. All right, thanks for watching, guys.
Appreciate it.